Hello, my name is Jeremy with Faithful Guardian Training Center, and today we're going to be talking about airway anatomy. Airway is going to be one of the things that we need to be intimately familiar with because if our patient does not have an airway, it won't be long before we don't have a patient. Uh, so to start with, your upper airway is going to start with your nose, or right there at your nares, which are the openings of your nostrils, and then you also have your mouth. So the back of your nasal cavity, that's going to be called your nasopharynx. And the back of your oral cavity is going to be your oropharynx, and collectively they make up the pharynx. This is important to know. That way, if you have an NPA or an OPA, a nasopharyngeal airway, or an oropharyngeal airway, that's what they're going to. That is where they're going, the anatomical cavities that they're going into to help provide displacement of the tongue. That way we can have a good airway and a good pathway from the opening of your mouth, opening of your nose, all the way down to through your trachea to your lungs. Next up we have our larynx, which is going to be your vocal cords or your voice box. There's these little two bands that are on either side of your trachea, and that's actually how we create our sounds. And that right there is the pathway that moves air in and out of our lungs and allows us to breathe. So if you have something that's called a laryngospasm, which is where your larynx actually closes up, that's going to prevent us from being able to breathe. If you have something that gets caught in your larynx, whether it be a Fruit Loop, a Lifesaver, a Matchbox car, things like that, you're not going to be able to move air in and out, and you're not going to be able to breathe. And so it's really anatomically, it's really important to kind of understand that. The top part of your vocal cords, because your vocal cords have a top and a bottom, the top part of your vocal cords, that is the lower portion of the upper airway. Your upper airway is going to go from your mouth, the opening of your mouth, the opening of your nose, all the way to the top of your vocal cords. So your nares to your larynx, or your mouth to your larynx. And that is going to be your upper airway. Your lower airway is going to consist from the bottom part of your larynx, which is where your trachea actually is, and that is going to descend all the way down into your alveoli. Now, something to understand about your entire airway: it is essentially one long tube from your alveoli all the way up to your mouth and your nose. It's just this one, it's all connected to the outside. Whenever I breathe in, I'm just breathing in air from the outside, and it's making it all the way down to my lungs before it gets pushed across a membrane, the alveolar capillary membrane, and allows blood to get my blood to get oxygenated through the hemoglobin. Now, so starting up at the top, you have your trachea, which is very midline in normal patients. It's midline, and you have this prominence that is going to be called your thyroid cartilage. That right there is a good anatomical landmark in most patients because directly beneath that is going to be your cricothyroid membrane, which that is going to be that's an anatomical landmark for paramedics who may need to perform a cricothyrotomy due to a failed airway attempt. And then directly beneath that cricothyroid membrane, you actually have your cricoid ring, or your cricoid cartilage. It is the one anatomical location, or anatomical item that we have that actually makes a complete circle. Now, this all composes your trachea, which goes down, and then you hit your carina. Your carina is like a fork in the crossroads. So you have one that goes left, one that goes right. So we have our one trachea. It divides into your left mainstem bronchi and your right mainstem bronchi. And again, the carina is where they divide and they go left and right. Now, your left mainstem bronchi, it goes, it's a little bit elevated. So it's not necessarily quite a fork. It's more of like a partial left turn, or almost like a complete left turn, and your right mainstem bronchi is almost like the road just continues on down. So your trachea, it just continues straight on down. And you'll be able to see this in the x-rays and in the drawings that you have in your textbooks. Now your left lung, it contains 2 lobes. Your right lung, it contains 3 lobes. Okay, and now part of those lobes, what's actually in those lobes is from your main stem bronchi, they then branch off into bronchi, which are the highways. So bronchi are the highways, and then they branch off to your bronchioles, which the way that I was able to remember this is the bronchioles are like those old back roads that don't have a whole lot of traffic that pass through them because they're so small. Your bronchioles get smaller until they end up in these pockets that are called the alveoli. And inside the alveoli, that is where our airway actually ends. And if our airway ends, it has to go somewhere from there. And it actually goes through a membrane. The air goes through a membrane in the alveoli, and it gets onto the oxygen, or it gets onto the hemoglobin. The oxygen gets onto the hemoglobin, and that right there it gets circulated through our body, and it circulates back, and we have carbon dioxide that gets dropped off, pushed across the alveolar capillary membrane, and then we breathe out the carbon dioxide that our body has made. So again, your upper airway, it extends from your nares in your mouth all the way to your larynx, which is also known as your vocal cords. And your lower airway, it extends from your vocal cords, the bottom side of your vocal cords, which is right there at your trachea, all the way down to your alveoli. And that's your airway.